Greetings, everyone. I am very excited today to be in conversation with Lanon Prigge, who I've been getting to know across these past months. And Lannon, I'm just incredibly excited about who you are, your work, and what you have to share with us today. And we're going to be talking in particular about your own channeled light language with the light catchers, but also the spectrum of work that you've done. But let me give a little bit of background and then we'll get into our conversation. It's
Good.
hard to summarize your background, Lannon. But Lannon is a spiritual seeker and a multifaceted artist. His background includes his range of artistic gifts and experiences, including his work in music, acting, film and television production, photography, visual art, creative writing, and his spiritual interests in spiritual reflection and shamanic practices, and so much more. He has a degree in journalism in dramatic arts and a Ph.D. in exploring ethics in embodiment practices. Now, that could be a whole conversation in and of itself.
I'm sure.
He has been on a path of following his soul's journey now into new forms of creative expression, including what we're going to talk about today, his work with light catchers and your creation of the soul song journey and the game of story. So, lots to talk about. But Lannon, I would love if we could start with your sharing some about your journey and what you and I have talked about in terms of the profound shamanic initiation that you've been through that led to your starting to work with the light catchers in 2019.
Yeah, so it's very difficult to map just the specific nodes because there's so many ways I could tell this story. I'm gonna pick up with let me start back in 2005. It's probably the best place to start in terms of contextualizing light catches. And in 2005, I'd only just started exploring visual art. I never ever studied visual art. It's one of the art forms I've never actually studied. Um, so it was a completely autodidactic approach. I actually didn't exercise one day. I believed up until that point that I was bad at visual art, and I was told so at school, and so I never studied visual arts at school. I was told, don't do this. um, but it's all about finding the right medium. And it started off with finding wax crayons, specifically the retractable kind of wax crayons, the new ones that you get, that you can kind of screw out. They're not like those old ones that were covered in paper. They've got a completely different nature. They've got a different texture. And I was in South Korea in 2002 teaching English. And I was bored at lunchtime. I never had anything to do. And they had these wax crayons. We never had them in South Africa. So I discovered them in Asia for the first time. And I had a set of them on my desk that I used in the classes with the students. And I did an exercise with myself. It was a shamanic exercise, an active imagination where I went, what if I took all of that censorship that I'd been given when I was growing up of you are not a good artist, and I just chucked it out the window. And I went, what if I pretended right now to be an artist? And you can actually see there's a picture on the wall. That's wax crayon.
Mm.
That was in the days when I was still using what you would call analog ways of making art. And this name came to me, Tan Sun, that this was the character that was now going to be the artist, Tan Sun. So I started playing with these wax crayons without any prescription, without any censorship. And within a space of a few weeks, I couldn't believe what I was producing. And it was just simply because I'd stepped out of the way and gotten rid of my internal editor. Then in 2005, I started working on a card deck I called the Muse deck, which was basically a tool for sovereign sense making. And it was a deck of 65 cards, and I drew the images for those with wax crayon. And then I had 3 booklets that came with it, and I worked on that material for over 15 years, constantly revising it until I got to a point where I realized that the true power of the practice was this practice of creating a card deck. I thought, what if everyone could have this opportunity of expressing their ethos in a set of cards, which is like a set of fractals. Each one represents some of the themes of your life journey. But I didn't have a language with which to make the images that would allow anybody to pick up the card and take their own journey, create their own meaning. And I struggled for a while with this idea of what language would I have to speak to make it abstract enough for the sense making that follows to be completely personal for somebody. And I tried to find an artist who could do it for me, and I couldn't find anybody, and I certainly couldn't do that kind of art. I had no idea where to start. I played around a bit. I did a lot of different mediums. I played with inks. I tried working the photography in, and eventually I decided to pack up that project. I just thought, I'm never going to find this thing, and I put it aside. And then in 2019, we made a big shift in our lives, or it's in 2018. We moved away from the city in Cape Town, and we moved to kind of a subtropical coastal village in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, so that I could start exploring some of these things. And my wife, Sam, wanted to start exploring new things. And no sooner had we arrived than I started having these strange experiences where they felt like panic attacks. But whenever I closed my eyes, I knew I was seeing images, but they were happening so fast that I couldn't actually see the pictures. It was just, it felt like in astral projections that I'd done previously and semi-near-death experiences I've had previously, the feeling of going down a tunnel of light, like you're traveling into the metascape, into the dimension that lies beyond. I call that the metascape, that which lies beyond view, beneath physical 3D reality. And these images would come so fast and I just couldn't capture them. And they gave me incredible panic attacks, as in I'd never experienced the like of it. And I couldn't sleep for months. As soon as, even during the day, if I closed my eyes, these flashes would come. And so I turned actually to a digital stylus. I started working digitally because I realized that what I was seeing was light, flashes of light. And in order to capture those, I would have to work in that medium. So I couldn't work on paper anymore or on canvas anymore. I needed to actually have the opportunity to sculpt the light. And slowly it took, this started at the end of 2018, and then in 2019, it became really intense. I was spending up to 10 hours a day just learning the digital tools, but also learning to get out of the way enough to let these images slow down and coalesce. And there was a whole ancestral trauma process going on as well. As in, when I started slowing down these images, I started having experiences of being people and presences and entities in places that I have in my lifetime, I have no recollection of whatsoever. And it was really frightening for a long time, because these experiences were so vivid. I'd had astral experiences before. I used to practice astral projection quite religiously at one stage. And lucid dreaming was something that I was very familiar with. And this was something completely different. It was like, it was more real than real, but I was a witness at the same time as experiencing it. But as the witness, I could do nothing to stop it's not like a dream where if you exert a certain volition, you can change the outcome. Here, I was stuck in a set experience, and I experienced across the expanse of history, from being the victim to the perpetrator, to a man, a woman, to being somebody in power, to being somebody completely powerless, and often having the same experience, the same scene play out twice in a row, where the first time round I was the perpetrator, and the second time round I was the victim, and I would have both experiences running almost concurrently, but in time they would play out sequentially. So this was all going on, and at the time this was going on, I was starting to get really, really physically sick. I started exploring online into things like ascension symptoms, my autonomic system, my nervous system basically just started imploding and collapsing. My immune system, my immune system started fighting my body on some level, like there was a discord. And at the same time, I was learning how to channel the light. And slowly, I slowed the images down, and I started capturing them one at a time, of almost moving down this tunnel, like one image at a time, one freeze frame at a time. The light catches I now paint are, you might apprehend them as a still picture, but they're not actually a still image. They're a moment captured within a movement. So if you look at one of my light catches, you get a sense of where it came from and where it's going at the same time, if you allow yourself to look at it in a certain way. But I realized as I got better and better at creating these light catches or channeling them, because it's a form of channeling, I don't make any decisions. I'm completely out of the way. It just comes through me. I never know what I'm going to paint next. I realized that a light catcher, although it is an image, it is not a picture of something. It is a feeling. Now, in my Toltec studies, when I was studying the Toltec teachings for my master's degree, they referred to reality in the Toltec teachings as a feeling. So reality is a feeling, and whatever you feel is real for you is real. So it doesn't matter whether you're having a journey using ayahuasca or psilocybin or any other entheogen. It doesn't matter whether you're having a lucid dream or you're having an astral experience. If it feels real for you, wherever you are at that moment, wherever your consciousness is, that is a reality. It is reality. Sometimes you just have that reality in the body and sometimes you don't, but it's not less real because it's disembodied. If it feels like this is really happening to me, that's really happening. And my light catches are not pictures of things. They are the feelings underneath the pictures of things. So if we look at a tree, we might be familiar with our imagination cloaks the tree in a certain way. It puts leaves on it and a trunk. But if you were to see the energetic nature of that tree, it would be completely different. There's a certain auric field that will map out the shape of the tree, but there are layers, subtle layers of energetics, frequency ranges, where that tree doesn't even look like a tree. It is something else. And I call that how it looks in the metascape. And it's more of the feeling of tree than the picture of the tree. So when you look at a light catcher, you're not looking at a thing. Your eyes become feminine and receptive, and they absorb the data in the light. And instead of projecting an image onto it, which is what the masculine wants to do, you go deeper into that feeling. You drop back deeper and deeper into the subtext, into the meta structure. And that's where the true meaning of something comes to light. And we can apprehend what I'm talking about just by looking at the nature of the eyes. Now, we talk about the eyes being the window to the soul. And the eyes can actually, they don't just receive information, they can communicate information. If you throw somebody a sharp look, and at that moment, they look back at you, and there's actually eye contact in that moment. It's almost like an electric shock goes off between the two people. You can speak to somebody with just the way that you look at them. And ironically, I think this is one of the problems in the real world nowadays, is we can have these conversations with each other without being able to make eye contact. Eye contact can only be me to you. It can only be two people ever at the same time. So there's no anonymity in eye contact. You see into the person's soul and they see back at you. And sometimes it can be quite nasty what you see, and it can be hurtful. But at the same time, you can share a great deal of love just by looking into someone's eyes. And that just gives us insight into what a light catcher is. It's a way of looking into your own soul. You're not seeing a picture. When you go into the feeling, you actually, it appears as if you're doing something outside of you, but you're actually dropping back through the pineal gland into the inner void that exists inside of you, the theater of the imagination. I don't think we've even begun to scratch the surface of what the imagination actually is. It is the most complex virtual reality simulation generating device that exists, and it seems to differentiate human consciousness from other consciousnesses on the planet. And I don't say dogs and cats and other animals don't dream, but to willingly and willfully be able to manipulate that technology like we can imagine stuff on purpose. And that affects our physical reality, because what's happening is we are imagining what's happening before form, before it comes into form. We're in the abstract, we're in the metascape, and all forms arise out of that metascape, from the formless into being. So the ancient Aboriginals of Australia used to say that we are the dreamers of mankind. Or that was their role. They came to hold the dream of mankind, but we are all actually possessors of that technology. We are dreaming together collectively this world into being.
I was
Does
just
that?
thinking about them as you were talking, because they would say that this reality is the dream, and their dreaming things into being is the reality. But part of what I think you're talking about also, Lannon, and you sometimes describe the light catchers as a portal. There's a way in which they're opening us up to enter into this multidimensional reality, and to we are in a time where our consciousness is expanding. We're opening to other ways of seeing and being, and I feel like the light catchers support us in that, because they're a portal, both opening us to connect with and sense into energies and archetypes, but they're also, as you said, guiding us to see our own inner process, because they're activating experiences, feelings in us. And we'll pull them up in just a minute, some of your light catchers. But for me, when I experience them, I feel an energy coming from them. And
Mm.
it activates something in me. I feel like they call us into other ways of knowing, and then allow us to explore that or to be in the process with that. And you and I have talked earlier about how light itself, photons, carry energy and information. So I feel like
Mm.
there's so much being communicated through the light of these light catchers that's beneath our conscious cognitive awareness, but they're very, very powerful.
Yeah, I think it's a realization that light is alive. It's alive. It's, we think of it, and maybe our educational upbringing in terms of the way we are taught science has given us the sense that gravity, weight, momentum, light, these are just kind of dead. Well, these are things we measure and we work with. They're out there, but a light is living, just as the oxygen we breathe is a living body of oxygen. It is interconnected, and it moves in and out of us. That's how it shares with us and how we share with it. Whenever we breathe in oxygen, we are taking on the consciousness of another being. We take that consciousness into us, and it's the same as when we eat food. And I think that's what the light catchers do, is they invite you to realize that when you absorb light, you're taking a living being into you, and it's full of data packages. It's full of these bundled quantum downloads. And your rational mind is not going to be able to apprehend those. It remains in its own language. It will influence and affect you. In the same way as when you go out into the sun, you don't have to do too much interpretation to go, ooh, the sun feels nice and warm on my skin today. It's a feeling. That's the reality of it. You don't have to interpret the sunlight. It is changing you and making you feel different. And that is its language. It's talking to you.
It's interesting, Lannon, because part of what you're describing is very shamanic. And I think we are now reconnecting with some of the ancient wisdom of the past and that shamanic understanding that indigenous people still know is that everything is conscious and that
Mm.
we have this capacity not just through ingesting something, but we have this capacity with our consciousness to commune with and communicate with the consciousness of a plant or the consciousness
Mm.
of an animal or the consciousness that's coming to us through light. So I
Mm.
think there's a way in which your light catchers are calling us back into those shamanic ways of knowing. And I think those shamanic ways of knowing are what we're beginning to discover now with quantum physics and the understanding of the quantum and subquantum levels of reality, where time and space and form are fluid, and we're tapping into consciousness and energies in a more fluid, pure state. And I feel like there's something with the light catchers that's calling us into that deeper experience of consciousness and reality. So let's look at some of them. Let's show some of them
Okay.
for people to have some experience of that.
So I've just created a little folder. These are some of the ones that I've painted this month. So it's like a visual diary that I've been keeping for several years, since about 2019. And I call it a visual diary because every day I make space at least twice a day. I paint at least 2 light catches a day to just tap in, let go of my own ego, get out of the way, and allow whatever message, because it is a message that's waiting to come through. And so I don't know what I'm going to paint. I have no idea. I just allow it to unfold. I let it take me wherever it wants to take me.
And then these become vehicles for reflection, for
Absolutely.
meditation.
Absolutely. Um, for example, I can give you an idea here of how in terms of a light catcher, how it works. Is that I'm not painting things as much as I'm dancing shapes and forms. As I work, I'm dancing. So in this image, you might be able to see spirals. And what I would invite you to do is actually to not just look at the image as one gestalt, as one thing, but to hone in on a point and follow a spiral and allow that to lead you into the picture. And your eyes making that movement is one of the ways in which our eyes feel. Our eyes are dancing all the time. They dance over the world. They follow the lines of spirals, of circles, of squares, hard edges, softenings. Um, our eyes are dancing all the time. And when we're aware of the fact that our eyes are dancing, something else happens because we've become multimodal. Now we've entered into the realm where the eyes can become kinesthetic. They can become vestigial. They can be like our internal organs. They can feel states of tension, contraction, but they're also transcribing the archetypal Platonic building blocks of which ourselves and our reality is constructed. So when I allow my eyes to follow a line and to not worry about where it's going like a labyrinth, I just follow it. I let it take me and I let that line lead me, and it'll take me somewhere else. It might take me suddenly to an explosion of light, and that might lead me on somewhere else. But I'm not trying to name, I'm not trying to describe, and I'm not trying to capture in words, at this stage at least, anything except the experience of seeing, which is an absorption of light. So the colors are also having an effect on us. We know from color therapy that different colors will affect us in different ways. And what's happening is we are actually learning to become increasingly multimodal. We're not just seeing the eyes as that which sees, but eyes as that which can dance and move and feel and have emotion also. We cry with our eyes. We laugh with our eyes, and we can cry when we laugh.
Mm.
There's so much going on through our eyes, but we often, because of the way our educational system works primarily, we never thought to think of the eyes as anything other than the mechanism by which we harvest information or we hunt for things. And so there's a more active feminine principle in working with light catchers that invite us into the movements and the dynamics and the feelings. And when I say feelings, I'm not just talking about emotions. I'm talking about senses and sensibilities. Like you might have a look at a light catcher and have a sudden memory or an intuition. You don't even have to like it. Sometimes not liking it is information that we are uncomfortable with processing. So if you have a reaction to one and you're, ooh, this makes me feel uncomfortable, I invite you to sit with it and explore that. Where is that discomfort? Where does this light catcher land in your body? Where is it speaking to your history? And you'll also notice there's a microcosmic idea here. If you zoom out from the planet Earth, you can watch the weather systems moving, and the way the weather systems move and swirl and spiral is also happening on the microscopic level inside a droplet of water. We've got various organisms creating currents that are swirling and spiraling. And so every plant, every animal, every gesture that we can make as a human being, a movement, as a sweeping gesture, a spiraling motion, an up and down, a jumping, a zigzag, all of these dynamics are captured in light catchers. Anything, when a plant grows, you notice that it doesn't just go straight up. You can actually, when you watch it in fast motion, and the technology nowadays allows us to watch these things in incredible sped up motion, the plant actually zigzags its way up to the sun. It wiggles its way towards the sun, and it bends as the sun moves across the sky. And then when it's dark, it bends back again. And then the plant is dancing with the light. It is chasing the light and it's dancing, but you have to see it in a sped up form, which are how my light catchers come to me, extremely fast. In order to be able to see that movement, I'm just capturing these one at a time. So in an image like this, you would be able to have a sense of a swirl or a direction. And in images like this, it becomes more complicated. There's a lot of place to enter and to start following the lines, the spirals, to feel our eyes accommodating the movement. The eyes are so accommodating. They're constantly, the iris and the flexing of the eyeball itself through very, very minuscule musculature is constantly accommodating the world. And at the same time, it's also creating that world. It's happening in the theater of the imagination. I'm not sure how many you would like to see, Heather. Should I just keep going through a couple?
Maybe a few more. And can you say something about you have phrases associated with these images, like this one for inner empowerment? Is that
Yeah.
coming from your own meditation and reflection after the images come to you?
I put a title on it right at the end. So it's not somewhere I was going. In a sense, I could put the light catcher 24, light catcher 26, but that's just a little bit too sterile for me. It's a bit too maths brain for me. But that would be a personal moment. If I were to share a light catcher with you in the Soul Song Journey, which is a process we've got where you work with light catchers and actually create your own card deck, your own wisdom deck, you would never ever see the title that I put on it because that's my point of entry. So you're having a little bit of an insider's perspective today. Not many people would ever see what I've actually originally called a light catcher. And in a sense, it is really just for record keeping purposes, because from the archive, the light catchers get used for videos, for email journeys, for card decks, for a variety of purposes, for personal meditation use. But if for example, I painted a light catcher for you personally, and I never put a title on that light catcher. That's not my place to do that. I would have said for Heather, but I would never have given it a name. That's your work. That would be your work to do.
Can you show some of those images that you've made in terms of our collaboration?
Sure. Let's go there. Let me see if I can find it.
These are so exquisite, Lannon. So unique. Each one is so unique. You know, I was thinking as you were talking about it, it feels to me like they not only engage our imagination, but there's something in my own experience of the light catchers. We're taking them in through our eyes, but I feel like they do activate the third eye, and they're communicating to us in this whole other light language that is guiding us to open more our spiritual consciousness, which is some of what your whole journey has been about as you've experienced all of this. I mean, before you show the other images, can you just talk a little bit about how you've come to understand and integrate this profound transformation that you've been through with this whole process?
Yeah, it has been. Um, I never actually finished the story you asked me earlier. So I actually became, and I still am struggling with my health. I became very, very ill as this process of working with light catchers began. And in part, I believe it's got to do with just channeling and allowing such a vast quantity of light to start moving through my system. But I'm not saying that it's not moving through everybody's system every day, but I've become aware of it and have been working so intimately with it that it just really became heightened or exaggerated to the point where a couple of years ago I was so ill. I actually I don't know I didn't think I was gonna make it through. To be honest with you, I could hardly get out of bed. I was just short of being bedridden, and it felt like my whole body had been plugged into an electrical socket and it was running an incredible amount of electricity through it. And my whole spine and everything, I got herniated joints. Everything just started contracting and kind of pulling in on itself. And it might be because there's too much light, like I might be damaging myself here.
Mm.
But at the same time, I'm going, how does anything evolve and progress? Yes, I do believe in miracles, and I do believe that you can spontaneously heal, or I might spontaneously wake up one day and be able to channel this amount of light without feeling any repercussions. But I'm not there yet, but it's not going to stop me. I don't want to stop painting light catchers. So even if it's hurting me at the moment, I accept that as part of the journey. And not only that, if I had not become ill, I would never have had the patience to sit like I have sat and painted. It was almost like there's this law of compensation. It's almost like life said, okay, you're going to sit down, Lannon, and you're not going to move. And if that means we've got to put your body in pain to make you not want to move around too much, then that's what's going to happen. And I accepted that right from the beginning. I just went, okay, I'm too excited about this new development in my life. And I've been wanting to explore this direction and trajectory for so long that I'm not going to stop now. And I've just kept going. And I'm still here. The more I let go of the suffering aspect of it and the poor me kind of, the more I go, this is just part of the package at the moment, and I accept that.
It's interesting too, Lannon, that we all are experiencing now a greater influx of light. You know, we're in the solar maximum, we're experiencing solar flares, geomagnetic storms, we're experiencing light coming to us from the galactic center. And I do believe that this influx of light is informing us, transforming us. It's impacting all of us physically, emotionally, spiritually, energetically. You are a pioneer in that you are channeling light in a profoundly intense manner. And I think you are also describing a kind of shamanic initiation and kundalini rising. And it's hard for the physical body to catch up with all of that. But the other piece that you've talked about, and this might be time to touch on the game of story, is that it's really been a journey for you of transformation and witnessing your own hero's journey through this whole time of change and really almost literally death rebirth. And it's really led you through a lot of your own deeper awareness and healing and transformation on all levels, which you then now support other people in what you call the game of story.
Yes. Um, I've shared this with you before, Heather, and I, I at a certain point realized that the only reason, one of the biggest reasons I've managed to survive this experience, and you might want to tell the audience a little bit about my astrology chart, because I think it's very relevant in terms of what we're talking about, especially over the last 7 years. Um, Framing my experience as a journey of transformation rather than saying I'm having a healing crisis or I'm suffering from chronic illness was a way for me to prepare myself, especially for those low moments. And there were a lot. There were, I'll be honest, I mean, I never wanted to commit suicide. The thought has never crossed my mind. But there were days I wished I would die. I have to be honest about that. It's not that I wanted to commit suicide, but I just couldn't handle it anymore. And it was coming at me in life from every angle: relationships, finances, physical, physical things that I was dealing with, family things. My father passed away during the same period of time, and there was a whole lot going on with that. Um, so it was just like this onslaught of every aspect of my life coming to a point of complete and utter breakdown, a shattering of every illusion that I'd ever held. And I'm not saying that I was an unconscious person before, not at all. I mean, you just have to look at my history to know that I've been doing self-inquiry and spiritual practice, deep spiritual practice, shamanic work for years and years and years and years. It was almost as if, and this is interesting in terms of the soul song journey we do, which is about extracting your personal ethos. It was almost as if all the knowledge I possessed up until that point that I could share with somebody in a consultation and it would be useful, but that I had not lived yet myself. I had to live every single one of those things through and reclaim them, not at the level of, in the Toltec warriorship tradition, they make a very clear distinction between knowledge that is just simply, information that you put into your head, and what they would refer to it as knowledge with a capital K. True knowledge is
Wisdom.
it is wisdom, and it means you've actually experienced it. And in the world today, in terms of the game of story, we live in an environment where it's so easy because you're not making eye contact with another person, and there's a level of anonymity for you to share opinions that you actually maybe haven't earned the right to share yet.
Mm.
And I think it's just too easy. I think, if there was just like one rule online and it was only share an opinion if you've been there, you know what I mean? If you haven't been there or you are not currently there, observe, formulate your opinion, but just don't share it because, it's, first of all, it's going to lack the power. And because it lacks the power, it convolutes the conversation.
Mm.
It clouds the waters, it muddies the waters. And that's why in ancient traditions, they would have a speaking stick. You would get the stick, and then it was a sacred ritualistic act that said, I am now speaking. Your turn to listen. And when I've spoken and I pass on the stick, then you can make a rebuttal or you can give me a counter argument. But while I'm speaking, respect the fact that this is my truth and I have a right to my truth. But it gets held in a container, which the internet just doesn't do for us. There are no boundaries.
Yes, and having used that ancient council format in every sacred circle that I've facilitated, another incredible distinction with that is not only is it calling everyone into actively listening and not just focusing on speaking, but it's about speaking from the heart. What is the truth that's needing to come through me for the benefit of the circle? And I think too much of what we've gotten caught up in modern Western culture in particular is coming from the mind, disconnecting from the heart. And as you said, it's not embodied wisdom, it's spouting ideas or facts or information. So, again, part of the journey I think we're all in collectively is how to come back to the heart and how to really be in our own inner process to be interacting from a very different energy with each other. But yes, your
It's a
game
very
story is also helping people reflect on their
mm,
journey and be in that witness self rather than just being caught up in whatever their experience of the moment is and
Mm.
identifying with it. You're really helping people be in that self-reflective process.
Mm. And it's amazing. It is just so amazing. What I refer to as the game of story. I mean, you can make it a fancy story if you want to, but we can take anything. I could say to you, tell me something that happened to you today, Heather. And if you interpret that as a waking dream, the symbolism, in the game of story, I say that any story is every story. So it doesn't matter what story of your life you tell, somewhere in there you're going to find an energetic current, energetic streams. The same themes are going to come up again and again and again, no matter which story you tell. And to be able to coalesce those and essentialize them, ferment them essentially into a nucleus that you can work with, a body of themes that you recognize. This is what I came here to do in this lifetime. I'm working this territory. And it may have overlaps with other people's territory, but it's very unique for me. And learning that words are magic spells, the magic. We often think of, on the spiritual journey, we might often think that we're learning to do these fantastic, phantasmagoric things. They talk about the cities and the people can, even clairvoyance and things like that. These are all things that are easily within our reach. We are doing them all the time. Everybody, even the so-called unawakened people, are using those technologies, perhaps poorly, but they are using them every day, all the time. Otherwise, we couldn't even have a communication with each other in this way. Without the imagination, without story, we all talking is always going to be a story. It's about something, a sequence of events in order to communicate information. Um, there is no way to interact without telling stories. And to recognize that as soon as we interact, we are telling stories because the truth is. It doesn't need any story to be told about it. You can't tell somebody the truth. The truth just is. As soon as you tell somebody the truth, you're telling them a story about the truth, and that may be truthful, but it's still a story. In other words, we have jumped modes from the isness of the thing to stepping outside of it, which means we are, it's the whole elephant story. There's that ancient story about the
Yes.
the story. The one person
Yes.
gets the tail, the other one gets the leg, the other one gets the trunk of the elephant, and they try and put the elephant all together, but the elephant doesn't care. It's just the elephant, and it was always the elephant, and it's irrelevant what they think.
But I think part of what's so crucial in what you're saying is we use our imagination and we project onto what is to create our stories. But then our stories shape our lives and our choices and how
Absolutely.
we act. And that part of this time that we're in collectively is we're collectively in such a time of transition and transformation. And if we don't reflect on the stories that we tell ourselves about our lives personally, and about our world, we will unconsciously keep creating whatever those stories
Mm.
are embedded in our perceptions of things. And that it's critical as we're moving into these new paradigms of the Aquarian age that we're shedding those outdated stories and opening to new ways of seeing and being and seeing our lives individually and collectively, which I think the game of story that you guide
Yeah.
people through is helping us see
Mm.
what we project out onto our reality or what we've told ourselves about our own lives.
Absolutely. I don't know, Heather, did you ever come across the work of Alice Miller? She wrote a book called The Drama of the Gifted Child.
Yes, excellent book.
Excellent book. I recommend to anyone in the audience who has not read that, in terms of where we're at as a society right now, how inherited stories, ancestral traumas, through the retelling and the rebehaving, therefore, um, just become these repetitive cycles. And the only way to break them is to actually start telling a different story. And that doesn't mean you make it up and you pretend. You take what exists right now. It's merely a matter of reframing it to understand that the way you're telling your story now is a matter of perception. And if you can learn to see it differently, the story changes. So if you can see the silver lining, the story changes. If I say to myself, Lannon, you are not ill, you are undergoing a personal process of shamanic initiation or transformation, then suddenly a whole lot of the fears and the anxieties that come with illness drop away. I don't have to worry about that stuff. I'm busy doing something. And that in itself changes the dynamic, the trajectory changes. And
I
we're
think
doing it
another,
all the time.
yeah, I think another aspect of that, and maybe you could show the Saturn card that you and I have done collaboratively together, because you and I are working on this project associated to my Aquarian shamanic astrology class to work with light catchers to be connecting with some of the energies of the different planets. But part of what I think is important as we're moving into the Aquarian age is something you were mentioning earlier, Lannon, that realization that everything is conscious. We're in the
Absolutely.
sea of cosmic consciousness. So it isn't only that we're creating a reality that we project out, but we can commune with the consciousness of everything around us and be informed by that and transformed by that. And I think as we can remember that, we can be in that dance of relationship and dance
Absolutely.
of communion again to realize that we're all a part of this larger unfolding of cosmic consciousness. We're each a fractal of that, but we can connect with the energies of everything around us.
I think that's ultimately it. The more we expand and that's what the game of story and our soul song journey, working with the light catchers and creating a card deck, all of these processes that my wife Sam and I are creating are designed to increase our multimodal capacities, to learn to sing color, to to um, to dance, paint, to it's almost like of learning a form of synesthesia. You know, people who suffer from synesthesia, when a dog barks, they'll see bubbles coming out of its mouth. And this is a very advanced form of imagination. These people have, for some reason, probably retained something from childhood where things hadn't been boxed down or defined in a certain way yet, where the imagination is just much more fluid. And the more multimodal we become. I think it was who was it? Gary Zukav. I think it was in his book, The Seat of the Soul. Um, he spoke about moving out of the traditional five senses and into becoming multi-sensory beings.
Yes.
And that's what becoming multimodal means. But it also means becoming multidisciplinary. If you have a look at somebody like Einstein or who else is a good example? Jung, C.G. Jung. These people were not just a scientist or an analyst, or they were musicians, they painted, they wrote poetry. And what it means is they had the ability to go multimodal. So when they were trying to solve a problem in physics, they would seek answers in music or in the way the wind moved leaves on the surface of a pond, or in the way they felt when the sun was setting. They were constantly using all of the sensory capacities, whether they be physical or metaphysical capacities. And that's why they had these radical insights, because they didn't come up with them. They were channeled. Those people
And
were open. Their portal was open and they saw
yeah.
into the beyond. It
And
was
again,
downloaded.
it's not being caught in the mind, but expanding the
Mm,
capacity of our consciousness to be seeing and knowing in these other dimensional ways,
absolutely.
which
And I
is
think
exactly what we're in now in terms of our own transformational process.
I've ended up where I've ended up because of my background, because it's so diverse. I've been a dancer, so I've had the kinesthetic experience. I've been a singer, and I've had to learn to transform feelings using my vocal cords into sounds that can actually touch somebody, move somebody. In other words, their energetic field changes when I do that thing. This is shamanism. This is shapeshifting. This is working with the arts. If I can paint a picture that actually makes you on the other side of the world who never met me in person feel something, what kind of powers are we talking about here? And then we've got to look very carefully at the media technologies that we are bombarded with all day long and recognize that there are people who know how these things work, that are deliberately designing them in a certain way to wield a magic that most people can't even see is a magic, and that it is actually there. But we can step out of that trap very easily when we start developing our multimodal capacities, because you just start seeing through the false. It doesn't have the same life, the same essence, the soul. It doesn't have soul. You can tell when somebody sincerely is telling you a story and it's true. You really can tell the difference. And it's not through anything that is visible. You can just feel it. You know, Heather, I think one of the concepts that excites me the most is conscience. And that's a word and a concept that people don't actually use very much anymore. Like when we look at what's going on in the world, people will talk about law and what was legal between these parameters and those parameters. But really, when we look at the world and we react to it from a place of truth, if we react to it from a place of conscience, I don't have to wait for a ruling by the International Court of Justice to tell me what right and wrong is.
Another way to frame that, Lannon, would be, and as you know, part of what I'm fascinated with is the understanding of the processional cycle, and that this last 5, 6,000 years of our human history has been our period of lowest consciousness, and we're now coming out of that, moving into accelerating higher consciousness, which I think is part of what you're tapping into with these downloads of light. But
For sure.
prior to the age of Aries, we didn't live under the rule of human law. It was
Mm,
about natural law and our intrinsic, I think this is what you're talking about with conscience. It's our intrinsic understanding of what's in right relationship or right harmony or right balance with each other, with the natural resources around us, with all that is. That's that natural law is in us and runs through the cosmos. Our
mm,
human law are our own projections of our minds and efforts to have control over others. And we're
mm,
needing to release those paradigms, come back to that deeper awareness of what is in harmony and balance with all that is. And again,
mm,
it's tapping into those other ways of knowing and our larger spiritual consciousness rather than getting caught in the mind.
mm. Absolutely. I mean, conscience is, it's etymologically, it's got two roots. The one is a knowing that comes from within, but the other etymological root of conscience is knowing together and knowing together. In other words, that which all of us, even though we have our own direct access to it, we all know together what right and wrong actually is. And we can feel it. It's a feeling. Conscience is a feeling. You can't teach somebody. You can teach somebody obedience, but you cannot teach them how to be good. And there's a difference between those two things. Somebody might appear to have lived a very good life just because they were obedient to all the laws and the structures. And somebody may have been an absolute rebel and broken all the laws. And yet the one person is obedient and the other person was actually good.
You're very Uranian, Lannon, and
Uh,
Uranus is very strong in your chart. And that's, I think, part of the intense energy that runs through you is that Uranian energy of that capacity to see the truth in what is. And I think part of what you're saying is, and part of what we're being guided back to is our minds can play all sorts of tricks on us. And
Absolutely.
even our minds can play tricks on our sense of our conscience. I've known so many clients that I've worked with who torture themselves with,
Mm,
the ways in which their conscious has turned into an internal predator. But I do believe that when we connect more and more with our soul self, when we come into witnessing our personalities and our lives, and we don't identify with that ego consciousness, but come back to soul consciousness, the soul knows in each moment what is in right action, right loving, right knowing. But
Yeah,
speaking of all of this, let's see the Saturn card because Saturn
okay,
is about our inner
absolutely.
discernment and how we can either get caught in that inner predator or inner critic, or as you and I talk about, the inner shaman.
Absolutely. Um, just before we show it to the audience, I just want to say this that this is just a mock-up. As Heather and I have been playing, my wife Sam's been doing some mock-ups. So this is not necessarily going to be the final result of anything, but it was us starting to explore this territory, and it's a coming together of Heather's knowledge, my light catchers, and then my wife Sam puts them together into what would probably be like a wisdom deck or an oracle deck of some kind at some stage. Let's see if this works. So that was with one of the light catchers that Sam tuned into the underlying essences or energies in what you shared about Saturn, and then combined them with some of your text. So that was the one. I think she did two mock-ups with slightly different, yeah. So the text changes at the bottom. You are a fractal of cosmic consciousness, able to move between worlds. And on this one, you are being called to reweave the realms. Did you want to say anything about this, Heather?
Well, it's just beautiful because part of what you and I are collaborating, you, me, and Sam, is how do we work with the light catchers and with some of my work, which is guiding people in tuning in more shamanically to the energies of the planets so that we're allowing them to inform us and give us their messages, tell us their meaning, and then we experience it. And I think that your images with the light catchers become those portals that can allow us then to open to that meditative experience, open a shamanic journey, in this case to Saturn, and then attune to how those archetypal energies of it potentially being our inner shaman can allow us to connect with the planet and be in communication and communion with it in our own individual ways. So, as you said,
Absolutely.
it's not a visual representation of some
No,
information. It's an opening for us to enter into our own experience and relationship with the archetypal energies of Saturn. Saturn is in us and it's outside of us, but we can then connect with those energies and be in a dialogue and in a relationship with those energies.
absolutely. And when we played around with the idea of Saturn and restoring Saturn's story, finding new ways of approaching Saturn, when we came up with this card, when this was the kind of outcome, it already offered so much healing for me in terms of, because I love being, I love shamanism, and I consider myself a certain kind of shaman. And to embrace Saturn as an inner shaman suddenly did this. It was almost like a flipping of the switch. A whole lot of things just kind of flipped inside out. And I saw things from a different perspective all of a sudden. And suddenly that was so healing for me. So whenever Saturn comes up in my life now, in my astrological journey, the same terror and paranoia that used to reside around, oh no, Saturn's doing this right now, is not there anymore. It becomes an opportunity to see not where I'm going to be punished, but where my opportunities to transcend my own limitations now lie. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, and
So
as
that's
you
my
and I looked at your chart, you've been through some very profound Pluto transits as well, taking you through these deep times of being in the underworld to go through transformation to emerge in a new way. So, but I think as we open to the planets and begin to allow ourselves to be in relationship with them, our stories about them can change, because this is part of what I'm passionate about as we move into the
Absolutely.
Aquarian age, is to stop projecting the stories of Greek and Roman gods and goddesses onto our planets, but to allow them to begin to speak to us and communicate with us in an energetic, archetypal way, so that we can understand them in new ways and then be in our own experience of them in different ways as we're moving into this new age. So before we close, Lannon, I'm going to list the links below, but
Okay.
I think what I'll be including are your website and these ways in which people can tap into the story of the game of story or the soul song journey, or explore with you the possibility of working with some of the light catchers for their own use or their
Personal.
own personal
Mm.
decks.
Yeah. So there are lots, I mean, there are lots of different ways of doing it. So if somebody wants a personal light catcher for themselves, um, I'm exploring offering that at the moment. And then in the soul song journey, you receive a light catcher every day and you have your own process of interpreting it. And then that offers a theme and a title and maybe a little bit of information, like on an oracle card, like that card we just had a look at for Saturn. But you end up with your own deck of 48 cards at the end of the process. And I know from personal experience, this is really where it all started, and what I want to offer people is, it's one thing to work with somebody else's oracle deck when you ask a question like, should I make this decision? Should I leave my job right now? But when you pull it out of your own deck, there's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide, and you're giving yourself your highest opinion and kind of like wisdom back at you. It's an extremely powerful experience. I can't even put it into words. And when you have on a daily basis the opportunity to work with a deck that you crafted yourself, you invested your ethos and your mythos into it, and then to have that artifact afterwards that you can carry with you for the rest of your life. You can use it for journaling, problem solving, for doing divination readings. But it's just a really lovely practice of working with the light catchers. And there's a product at the end of it, which you take away with you.
And a
And
beautiful
then,
way to stay connected to your higher self.
so there's that way of connecting. And then Game of Story, which is my most recent offering, which is there's an email journey that you can go on where you tell 52 stories, one a week over a period of a year, or you can work with me one on one. And it's an open ended email conversation. So for a month, I'm available to you. I ask you to tell a story, you tell me a story, and I reflect it back to you in ways that will allow you to first of all accept your story. You don't have to change your story. Your story is not broken. All we're trying to do is highlight what's fixed about it. And sometimes we've just missed what's fixed about it. So it's a reinterpretation of your story, which becomes a new telling. And as you use different words, you're casting different spells.
Mm.
And just shift from positive languaging, from negative languaging into positive languaging. Just that alone, the shamanic maneuver that you have performed when you just change the words you use, is incredibly powerful. But I think we need to learn to think for ourselves in this day and age. And contemplation that is not just about no mind, contemplation that is about holding up an idea in front of us and not asking somebody else's opinion, but seeking out where is our personal history and experience with that thing. Where did we inherit this idea from? When was the
Mm.
first time this idea entered my sphere of consciousness? Did it come from within me or was it given to me? And what were those agendas behind it being given to me? So if we learn to contemplate, to muse, to play with the substances in our lives and to be alchemists, like to mix and match stuff game. And I call it the game of story because if we approach playfully, it's also to approach with the awe that a child has. A child is awestruck by the world, and that's play. Serious play, but it's play.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Lannon. Thank you for the beautiful work that you're doing. And I think it is part of what you're describing then is instead of being mired in the story and this experience of this incarnation and this personality self, the more that we allow ourselves to reflect on the story, the more we see, as you said, strands coming from our ancestral history or past life issues or trauma in this lifetime. But more and more, then we come into that observer self, who
Mm.
then is the guide to our soul self. And our soul self understands why we've had all of these experiences and what the meaning of it is and what the alchemical transformation can be as we work that through at that deeper level. So you're doing that shamanic work. And thank you for the profound work that you're doing with the light catchers. And we'll continue this collaboration together. So thank you.
Thank And Heather, I just wanted to say thank you so much for making a space for me to tell my story, but more than anything, for seeing me. Uh,
Mm,
you, I've not often met a person who's able to see the light catches and see what they actually are, which is not a visual phenomenon. And that is definitely the shaman within you. You have the capacity of a seer, and I mean a seer in a shamanic perspective,
mm,
as in someone. It could also be it's hearing, it's listening. All of these are acts of seeing in shamanism. It's not just about the eyes. So I'm
mm.
deeply grateful to you and deeply grateful for this space and to everyone who has managed to stay with us until now for your attention.
I'm so grateful to this community and really believe we're in this together. We are really co-creating this new world together as we attune to each other and hold that sacred space with and for each other. So thank you, Lannon, and I'm deeply grateful to all of you in the community. Blessings and love to all of you.